Hello there, my name is Doc Conrad, and this is my little preamble to the podcast. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who is a part of this podcast, including all the guests and the two wonderful artists who helped bring this podcast to life. At Meloscav, at MELOSCAV, created the icon for this podcast, and at Doidaflower, at DOIDUHFLOWER, is the artist behind the visuals on YouTube and other social media sites. If you'd like to keep up to date with the show, follow the show on Twitter at CommsOpenPodcast. For the 7th episode of Commissions Open, I interviewed Mya Schuwerk, a talented non-binary voice actor, cosplayer, and the voice director / senior writer behind Fallout Miami, an expansive Fallout 4 mod. You can follow Mya on Twitter at Mya Schuwerk. That's MYASCHUWERK, or their cosplay Instagram at Mya Schuwerk Cosplay. Thank you, and have a wonderful day. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Commissions Open, an interview podcast all about art in the digital age. Hear the process, stories, and lives of artists, voice actors, video creators, editors, musicians, and many other talented creators in the era of online work. I am your host, Doc Conrad, and today we have the wonderful and lovely Mya Schuwerk. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. We did a little bit of a pre-talk, and I'm not entirely sure where exactly you want to go ahead and start. So I'll go ahead and how is it that you got into first off voice acting? Because I know there's a lot of different fields that you're in, but I want to go ahead and touch on that first because that's one of the ways that I initially found you, and we ended up following each other. I'd love to go and hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's 2 years ago now. I was a new parent and I had had a lot of changes in my life. And up until then, I had really, really wanted to be a stage actor. And I did a lot of community theater and even got very close to doing local theater professionally.
Oh wow. I'd love to talk about that
Yeah.
more afterwards, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, but I couldn't do that anymore because I had a very young child at home and you can't stay for a rehearsal that goes until 1 in the morning.
Mhm.
So I kind of had to give up on that, but I missed acting so much. And I don't remember exactly what made me think, hey, you should look into voiceover. But I know that somehow the idea got into my head. And of course, like most people who do smaller voice acting work, I started on Casting Call Club.
Mhm.
And one of the very first projects that I was ever cast in on Casting Call Club was for a Fallout 4 machinima, and I was cast as the female lead. And the director of that project is now my significant other, and we've been together since then. So,
Oh wow.
um, yeah, and we've both started doing professional voiceover since then. So it's been kind of a crazy couple of years.
Wow, that is pretty that's a little bit of I wouldn't say happenstance, but it's very interesting hearing how closely you just found yourself into this into this sort of world, and how it's affected your life a lot.
Yeah, it's I met my two best friends through voiceover. My partner, everything that I have really came from just taking that little maybe I'll try doing some voice acting just to see how it goes, and now it's become my life, but it's pretty great.
Mm. You're closely you're in a I'd say the voice acting community is a really close knit, I would say, especially among other voice actors and actresses. Would you
For
agree?
sure. Yeah, I absolutely agree, and especially union actors are a very small circle, and I think that non-union actors are an equally small circle because when you go on Twitter, you know everybody, you know all of the active working voiceovers on Twitter, really.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's so funny because I think I was already following you at the time. I think we were mutuals, but I see you on a Sea Dog VA video?
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah, that was me.
I freaked the hell out. I was like, oh my God, I know who that is.
So okay, all right, fine. This is the one time of the podcast where I get to talk about myself because this is the wildest
Please
shit.
do.
This is the wildest shit. I got a commission on Fiverr. because I'm a Fiverr voice actor. I wasn't entirely confident in what I was doing, but I wanted to go ahead and get a little bit of money for what I was doing. So I put myself out there. I've done some work, and then I get this commission from a guy that I wasn't fully certain of, because I had never heard of Sea Dog at the time when he commissioned me.
Mhm.
And I got this commission for like, hey, I need you to sound like this. And I'm like, okay, I could try that. And I gotta go ahead and open this up, because I gotta look at Fiverr, because the DM is hilarious for what he sent me for that list. Because
It was a JoJo dub, right? You played JoJo.
yes, yeah, I did. And the funniest thing about it was that, like, I knew it was a JoJo thing. Like, I knew it. I've never watched it, which
I'm
is
an
like,
incredibly big fan.
I a lot of people are, and I've wanted to go ahead and get into it, but it was just never been a thing that I've like focused on.
Mhm.
But he sent me the DMs, and they were hilarious. He said, so I have the three things. He said there's a YouTube video. That was like my list for like, hey, what is this going to be? He sent me the lines, and then he said further directions or requests for the. I said further directions or requests for the reading, audio file, or anything else. State them here. He says, please read the lines like you're being destroyed in a fight, but trying your best to hold on and fight. And I'm like, okay, well, this is a kid, because I've never heard anyone like ask me something in that manner, other than like young kids. And
Mhm.
because I get plenty of those on Fiverr, of like, either whether it be like people from different countries, or like young teens who want to go ahead and be their first step into doing something in animation or dubbing. I thought it was like, oh, this is gonna be some sort of little parody thing, whatever. He wanted to go ahead, keep it away from me that I was JoJo, so he labeled the title as J. And
Mhm.
he wrote out the first one, gasp. The second one, being crushed to death noises. And then he wrote aura 10 times, in parentheses, say as many as you can, as fast as you can in 3 seconds. He then copy and pasted that exact same line one more time, and then wrote aura with like 10 A's. That was
Oh,
all I had, and now I'm on a video with 500 like thousand views, and I'm like, what happened?
did it occur to you that it was going to be a JoJo thing when you saw the auras, or were you
Yes.
not familiar enough at the
Oh,
time?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
I'm always curious.
No, yeah,
Because his
yeah.
videos.
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. I was aware of it being I was aware of it being a JoJo thing when I saw the auras. I was like, okay, fine. And then I told my other voice acting friends about it. Specifically my friend Kaya Laura, she's great, and I had her on the podcast like third episode. But she told me like, oh, that sounds like this, and she linked me to the first Sea Dog video, and I'm like, oh no, that happened like not even that happened like 2 days afterwards, whatever. And oh wow, oh, the PC restarted. Okay, no problem, no problem. I'll go ahead and stop recording real quick. I'll go ahead and start back up. Okay, so before your PC rudely interrupted my totally relevant story.
It is relevant. It's a great story. I've
it,
I've been wondering since I realized that was you, and I meant to ask.
mhm. Like I said earlier, before this whole thing restarted, I got the commission, and I got the lines, and they sounded ridiculous. Whatever. My good friend Kaya Laura, follow her on Twitter, she linked me to this and said like, "Hey, this might be what happened," and I didn't even check the Fiverr name, so I didn't even realize that his Fiverr name is the exact same. At least it has Sea Dog in it for his like YouTube channel. So I was like, okay, well this might be it, but it's probably not. I'm not gonna go and worry about it. I mean, he already did an episode on it. And then I find out from an Instagram DM from another one of my friends later on that on the 21st of December, he like uploaded the video. And I'm like, oh, I'm in this. Oh, it's been like 6 days. I just haven't known that I was in this video. So like, I just didn't believe it at first. Like, it was like the craziest thing to me that I was like listening to myself like in cringing because like I realized that I thought I was doing this like I even said to him, "Hey, I'll do retakes if this isn't good enough," and he just ripped and gave it to the editor, and I'm like, "Oh
Hmm.
man, I felt awful because I felt like I did a not first off not a good job representing Shotaro, and then I didn't feel confident because like luckily he ripped on other people in this is sound like the worst thing, but this is the boost to my confidence. He ripped on other people in the video but didn't rip on me, and I feel like the only reason why he didn't rip on me was because the other guy was so good that he was too busy giving him praise.
His editor really hooked you up because you did a fine job. Like, you did okay.
Mm-hmm.
For no context, it was pretty good. But the guy who played Dio in your clip was unreal. It was
Yeah.
so good.
He was he knew it. He did the as soon if I could have read like 8 seconds of pass, I'd be like, okay, well, I got something. But with that one, I just said aura as fast as I could in 3 seconds. So like ran out of breath. It was awful. But okay, that was the small segment that I will refer to as this is my time. Now the rest of this
You have
whole
to have
hour
me
long
time.
this I have to have me time, but the rest of this whole podcast is going to be about you because you are wonderful, and
Thank
I
you.
enjoy your work, and I cannot wait to go ahead and hear more from you in the future. So like I said, the voice acting community is really close, tight knit.
Hmm.
As you could probably tell, we've had like multiple voice actresses and voice actors on the show. I believe you're like the third. I'd have to say at this point. But there is how would you say is there any sort of like roles that you're incredibly proud of in your voice acting career?
I have played a lot of roles that I'm very proud of. A couple of them I can't talk about because NDAs, guys.
Oh, they're the best.
Yeah, I will say that like my favorite type of role to play and the role that I get hired to do the most for money is definitely like teenage boy protagonist.
Oh wow.
Like, I'm playing Luffy in a One Piece Abridged series,
Yeah,
and
yeah, I saw that.
I think that's the most fun I've ever had doing a voiceover job. I think
Hmm.
it's great, and I love to do anything like that, and I'm fortunate that I get to do those a lot. But I think I'm trying to think of what I'm most known for, and now I'm like I can't remember any voice work I've ever done.
Well, I think the
Mods probably.
yeah. The most notable thing that that I would say that you've done is that you are, we'll talk about the voice acting side of it first, but you're doing a lot involved with the Fallout Miami.
Yes. Oh
story.
God. Oh my God. I forgot that I voice act for Fallout Miami. What's wrong with me? Yeah.
No,
No.
you're in a lot of that. Yeah.
I do. I put like 20 plus hours a week of just like development work into Fallout Miami, and the updates are so infrequent that I do kind of forget that I'm originally a voice actor for them. It's not anywhere near the bulk of what I do, but yes, that's absolutely what I'm most well known for. I think in terms of gaming and the mod community.
Mm-hmm. You've done a lot of you've done update videos for them. You've done voice work as far as like characters. I'm not entirely sure what exactly characters you've done, but it states that you've done some.
I have. I did do. I think this is one of the top mods on Skyrim Nexus. I think so. A lot of people may know of the mod, Project AHO. I don't think a lot of people know me from the mod, but I do voice 2 of the main characters.
Okay.
Yeah, and in Isan's Raven Gate, which is like the underground fight club mod for Skyrim. People used to know me from that, but it's been a couple years.
Mm-hmm. Skyrim's a really old game, and it has a lot of like really good modding communities. And
The mod authors for Skyrim are heroes.
yeah, Bethesda as a whole has like it has like such a grand modding community that like it's given, I'm guessing, you a lot of different opportunities and a lot of different other creators opportunities to voice work in there, especially.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And mod authors are so just immense when it comes to talent and the things that they can do. When you work so hard and create such professional things in your free time for other people to enjoy for free, I think that there's something very special about that.
It makes sense. I mean, you're we'll touch back on like some of your other audio work, but specifically about your work in that, you have a little bit of an insight into, especially that of modders, because you are a writer and a voice director, not a caster, a voice director for Fallout Miami specifically.
Yes,
And
I do
yeah.
the casting as well.
So you do the cast. Okay, you do the casting as well. So is it?
Yeah, I'm the
I look.
voiceover director. Like, I'm the voiceover project lead. So
Mhm.
I get final say on casting. I do all of the organizational work that goes into voiceover. I make sure that we have all the takes we need. I am going to be live directing. Just a lot. Everything that goes on that has to do with voiceover, that's me.
Okay. And you've also done writing. I know that you've done a little bit in terms of like in terms of like at least like acting, but I'd love to go and hear about your process in terms of like writing. Like you're one. Are you the sole senior writer, or do you have like a team? Like, what's up with that?
We have three. There are three main factions in Fallout Miami. For people who don't know what Fallout Miami is, it's a DLC-sized Fallout 4 mod. So essentially an unofficial DLC, and it is now in like real production development, which means that like the whole creation process has actually started.
Mm-hmm.
And for writers, that means that we're working on main quest stuff. And so what they did was break down the three main factions and divide up all the writers to work on the main quests for those. Okay. So I am the main quest development lead for the Nuclear Patriots, which is one of our factions. And then I also write for the Enclave faction.
Okay. So you basically have it sort of more separated out into that, and I'm guessing you have contact with the other senior writers.
Oh yeah, we work closely together.
Yeah, especially for like themes and for like if quests interact with another one, you have dialogue in between the two. What's that process like?
It is a really delicate process because we do have, as with most games and most DLC content, I think when you have a couple of major factions, there are points where like you have to choose a side or characters interact or if an NPC dies, and we need to cross-check all of that and make sure that it lines up and make sure that the factions are locking at the same quest stages. So it also kind of requires you to understand how implementation and programming work, because you need to make sure that the notes you make, because it is development for a mod and not just writing a story, you need to make sure that all of your documents are exactly formatted as how they need to be so that the programmers know what they need to do to make the quests not break when the game is played. It's actually a really complicated and involved process, and this is the first time I've ever worked as a writer on a game, you know?
Have you?
There's,
oh, sorry. You go.
Oh, no, sorry. I was just going to say, because there's like storyboarding and writing a novel, which I'm not good at. I don't write novels. There's screenplays, which I do a lot, and audio dramas, which I also do a lot, and I'm currently making one of my own. But games are a whole other ballpark, is what I was going to say.
Oh no, that was actually what I was going to go and ask you about further was your work on different writing projects, because I'm guessing that you got into the you got to become a senior writer from your, not only from your voice work and knowing how dialogue works from you reading stuff, but also from writing, I'm guessing. So I'd love to go and hear more about that. You said audio dramas, and you've done like, you don't enjoy novels, but you've like written at least a little bit.
Yes, I've written. I wrote novellas that I never published because I wasn't happy with them. I've written short stories. I've written a couple of poems that were published that we're not going to ever talk about or acknowledge. I love writing screenplays, and I did write for a machinima for a while.
Okay.
When I applied to be a writer for Fallout Miami, I was already a voice actor, and there was a different lead writer than there is right now. And I submitted to him, and I was like, look, I've never worked on a mod or a game before, but I have the screenplay from this goofy machinima that I wrote, and I've got D&D world building materials.
Oh,
because I
wow.
DM.
Oh,
and
I do too.
He was like, I love this. This is great. You're hired. And I was like, yeah. And I didn't become a senior writer until a couple months ago.
Okay, so now you got me on D&D, which is a whole new mindset, which I
Yes.
love.
Actually, I'm
Um,
DMing tonight and I've done zero prep.
oh, 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 honey, I've done the exact same thing.
I
I
do it
had,
every week. My
I
players are wild.
Yes, I run 2 sessions every 2 weeks.
Mhm.
But like they're on the same. They're finally synced up, so now on the same week. I have like a full Bard college, and I've got one where
Wow.
they are they're doing, well, at least they were in a Bard college. They're all Bards, but they made the multi-class. And then I did one where they are there's a band of adventurers going throughout the big city, fighting a lich, whatever. But you said that you got like the D&D notes for creating a story. How closely connected do you think that doing that is to your writing? I'd love to hear about that.
Doing that as in like DM stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Incredibly so. And in fact, the podcast that I'm creating, I am actually co-writing that with Fallout Miami's lead writer, Kate Constantine. We are working on it together, and we both DM tabletop games all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the podcast is heavily, heavily inspired by a D&D style adventuring party. It's like a high fantasy
Yeah.
adventure podcast.
That
And
yeah. I'll keep going.
oh
Sorry.
no, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna go ahead and talk about it's rare that I get to I go ahead and do this where I'm more or less like interrupt, because there's a lot of things I want to go and add, because not only is this like the first time we've like most of my other guests I've known about for either a long time, or I've talked to before. But with you, like, we've known each other for a short amount of time, and this is more or less the first time we're meeting, so I get to like butt in about like, oh yeah, D&D stuff. Like I've done multiple different like attempts with not so much podcasting, but like different story writing with with D&D in mind, and DMing is one of the most it is a very thankful job if you have a good party, and one of the most thankless jobs if you have a bad one.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I'm so lucky. My party is a dream party. It
Mm-hmm.
really is. And like my significant other actually quit DMing and is
Mm-hmm.
thinking about coming back, but quit DMing like 6 months ago, I think, because he just couldn't handle how difficult the party was sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a real thing because I started and quit very quickly 2 other campaigns before the current one that I'm doing, and having a party that is willing to work with you and not like just wreck everything on purpose all the time
Mm-hmm.
makes all the difference, because I always thought I hated being a DM and I thought that I just wasn't good at it. But I have the players that I have now and I like it more than playing, you know. Creating and building the world and making NPCs, and just I'm a people pleaser and I really love making things for my players that I think they're gonna love.
I love hearing this. This is DM camaraderie right here.
I
I never
know.
I only have one other friend who's a DM friend, and we like agree on some things, but like this is like peak like finally I have someone who can understand this. Okay, but moving on from D&D, which is a great topic. Please
Yeah.
play. Um I want to go ahead and talk a bit more about the work you've done, more still in audio, but that of like audio dramas, because
Mhm.
there's it's a small subsect of the I'd say it's more niche, but it is very dedicated. I'd say. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree. I think
Yeah.
it's as like small and tight knit as the voiceover community is. Audio dramas are like the little teeny tiny island inside of it where all of the audio drama people are just crammed in there.
Mm-hmm. You
It
yeah
is.
yeah
It's
you
yeah, go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
no, you're fine. You've done different work on that. I'd love to go and hear more about it.
Yeah, I haven't done a ton of voiceover work for audio dramas. I did an alien fan podcast called Alien Solara, which was really cool. I played the ship's AI and also their medic. And then I had a very small extra role on Congeria, which is I I want to say it's like a suspense thriller and also kind of a film noir vibe
Mm-hmm.
audio drama about a detective trying to solve the murder of a little girl, I think is what it was. But it's by the same producers as the No Sleep podcast. the Paragon
Mm.
Collective. Yeah, and I had really I was brand new to voice acting at the time, and I had no business being on that podcast. There's like incredible actors like Aaron Lillis and Addison Peacock and Atticus Jackson, but I was on a project with Atticus and we became friends, and he was like, "Hey, I need someone to play a 911 dispatcher. Do you want to just do this real quick?" And I was like, "My audio quality sounds like garbage." And he said, "That's fine. It's going to be distorted and stuff." So I was like, "This is it. This is my crowning achievement at the time." I was like, "I'm so famous now." But no, I've never really had any other big podcast experience, I would say.
Okay. Well, hopefully this one will grow to that
I
being
hope
a big
so.
size. I hope so
I'm
too.
not acting in this thing. I'm not acting
Yeah.
in my own podcast.
Yeah, you've done quite a bit of work in terms of audio for that. You've done work in video games and mods and animations. One Piece of Bridge, you already stated. Some of the machinimas you've done. Have they been more comedy based, or they've been more like serious acting based? How would you put it?
The one that I worked on that I met my spouse through started as, honestly, I don't know. Am I allowed to say bad words?
Oh, go for it.
Okay, yeah, it was a shit post basically with
Mm-hmm.
my significant other and a couple of his idiot friends. I want to say 8 years ago,
Mm.
and then 2 years ago, 6 years after he first posted the videos, he decided he wanted to kind of try and make it into an actual thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and say it, and he knows already, so he's not gonna mind. It was awful. The first couple of scripts were so bad. he's he's very creative and has a lot of good ideas. He's terrible, terrible at executing them. So they were really rough, and it was like really contrived comedy and kind of just crass humor. But I feel like we were able to reel it back into something that is funny, but also can manage to be a compelling story. And I think that's where my wheelhouse is, because that's where Kay Constantine and I are trying to go with the podcast as well. I prefer and am most comfortable in something that I can always inject a little bit of dry humor and dark humor and just always something, so it's not completely serious and just devoid of any lightheartedness.
Yeah, I think that I'm not gonna psychoanalyze, but I feel like that comes a lot from D&D, where it's a high fantasy adventure with 21st century friends throwing in their current day memes, and you're just like,
Yeah.
God, I'm trying to make a somewhat serious story that you guys could be compelled in, and then you're just like doing a backflip for no reason, like just because you could say it, you don't have to actually do it. That was the first thing I did.
Right, and I can give you as many little insights into my own podcast as I want. I don't have to worry about spoiling anything. But no, there's at least one character in this audio drama that I'm working on that I just feel is such a little shit and is kind of a meme in and of himself. And it's nothing over the top or super ridiculous, but I feel that. I'm like, this is definitely a modern day person stuck in like a halfling body in a fantasy world.
That's mostly halflings. Yeah, they're
He's just the worst. I love him so much. He's just absolutely just a trash goblin.
those are some of my favorite characters. And
Me
I
too.
all right, yeah, I think that I don't know. I think that there's just a really interesting dynamic that that has, especially on like a modern day setting, because everything that we hear from a story wise is never fully experienced, but it's about a fantasy world in which you can like suspend your belief and whatnot. So there's of course got to be moments of like lightheartedness, because not everybody's thoughts should be always like fully serious and dark involved with it. There's got to be something to add a little bit of reprieve. So you're adding that is actually like really important, especially in writing.
Thank you. I think so too.
So, there are you are like a Swiss Army knife in terms of like talent,
Thank
because you've done voice acting, you've done acting, you've done cosplay, you've done writing, which I barely like recognized the writing portion of it initially in my research. I'm so glad you talked about it. But let's go ahead and start back from where this really all began, which was your acting side.
you.
I'd love to go ahead and just tell me everything you want to go ahead and ever say about like about acting. I'd love to go and hear all of it.
Well, I started doing ballet and like live theater, like non-musicals, when I was 3 or 4 years old, and I performed live from that time until I was 19. And so for a long time I thought that was what I was going to do, you know. Growing up, I started doing musicals when I was 9 years old or 8, I think. And from that time I did 3 or 4 a year and did like acting workshops, and I was taking voice coaching, and I like everything that I ever did was with the thought in mind that someday I am going to be on Broadway, someday I am going to do musical theater as my job, or maybe, you know, act in movies as my job as a backup plan, because of course the backup plan is being a Hollywood star. So for a long time acting was everything, you know. It was all I did, it was all I cared about. And you know, it kind of culminated. I was in a production of this ridiculous musical called the 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, and I was one of the leads. Their only leads. And I auditioned for a professional, like, local Broadway production of Hairspray, and I didn't get it. And I don't know what about that really just crushed me, but I quit acting for a long time, and then I joined the Army.
Oh wow, I've never heard about that. Yeah.
Oh, it's a boring story. I joined the Army because I was broke. But after that, I got an injury when I was in the military, and I couldn't dance anymore. I still can't. I'm a disabled vet. So when I couldn't do ballet anymore, I kind of gave up on the dream. And voice acting brought it back. Like, it gives me the same feeling that I had, and I think that's something that I can never really repay the modding community and the voice acting community for, because, you know, no one wants to watch their dream die. No one wants to let go of something that they've always wanted. So I feel like now, even if I don't make it big and become like the next big Viz Media Funimation dub star, I have that, and that's everything I could ask for.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I was unaware of that, and I would have of course asked you further about if you want to talk about it further if I knew. But I think it's really special that working in voice acting has really brought that back, because you still have plenty of like emotion to go ahead and show and put forth, and your writing especially can be a great outlet for that. And while you can't exactly go ahead and do what you did before with ballet and like acting in the physical manner as much, you definitely are showing your creative side a lot more. And I think that it is a wonderful thing to go ahead and have, especially as someone for you. I think that's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So you've done, like I said, you've done acting in the past. You do voice acting now, and you've done writing as well. But you also do cosplay, and you said that's one of the things you're going to be working on. You're working on like soon because you have a con coming up. Is that right?
It's not. I said it's coming up like it's next week or something. It's in May, and that's just who I am as a person. I'm like, I have these 3 costumes I'm working on. I need to finish them in the next 3 weeks for no reason. Well, there is a reason. There's a reason, and it's because I promised my husband I won't start any new cosplays until I finish these. I just want to get them done so I can make more. As I mentioned, I'm a disabled vet, and I can't work outside of my house really anymore. But we sustain ourselves, so it's all good. So I get to devote a lot of time to my creative pursuits, and I'm very, very privileged for that. But yeah, I devote like a full-time job's worth of work to cosplay these days. It's unreal. It's stupid, honestly. But that's what I'm doing the most right now. And it's cosplay is really something so unique, because you need to be good at so many things to be, I guess, successful isn't really the word I'm looking for, but to get anywhere with cosplay.
I can definitely state that you have like just from like your multitude of talents and your dedication to it, I definitely think that like cosplay is right up your alley in that description, especially.
Thank you. I've always really liked doing crafty stuff, and I never was good at like making costumes or anything, but I used to sculpt, and I always like I've been a painter for a long time too. So I think that was the first thing that drew me to it. And of course, when you grow up liking video games and liking anime, I started cosplaying 1 year ago, and it's kind of just taken over everything. And people like Yaya Han and Ginny D talk about this all the time, but you have to be so multifaceted to be a cosplayer that it kind of demands that much time, because you have to be good at crafting, and you have to be able to sew, and you have to be good at, if you want to be well known, you have to be good at marketing, and you have to be an actor, and you have to be able to produce internet content. It's just a lot.
Mm-hmm. I had figured as much. The most amount of work I've ever done for cosplay was dressing up like Broloff, and I looked hideous. But you know, that was more me as a kid, and I treated it more like, oh, it's costume day, rather than like what you've done, which you've had. I'd love to go and hear some about some of your cosplays that either you've been working on, or some that you've done, because like there are some that are just that I'm looking at right now, especially in your Twitter banner. They're great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, those are my icon and my banner are both from C2E2 last year.
Mm-hmm.
And I did I'm trying to remember what the other cosplay I did. Okay, cool. Yes. So I did Android 18 from Dragon Ball on Friday.
One of my favorite characters.
Meets my favorite. She's my absolute favorite, and she has been since I was like 8. The next day on Saturday, I was gonna be Vegeta. It was gonna be Super Saiyan God Vegeta with the blue hair, and then I realized I suck at spiking wigs. So it was like the last week before the con, and I decided to just use the same Android 18 wig and tell people that it was an interpretation, but it was supposed to be Vegeta. I made that armor, and I actually had somebody at the con who didn't believe me. Like, they were like, where'd you buy your armor? And I was like, I made this. And he was like, no. And I was like, somebody had to make it.
Yeah.
It was me.
You can take that two ways. You could either take it as you could take that as like, oh yeah, really, you made it, or like, wow, that's such high quality armor, somebody else had to have like made it, and you had to have commissioned it. Like,
I know, that's how you have to choose to interpret it. And I kind of felt good about it, because that's the first armor build I ever did.
Yeah.
And I was very proud of it. Now that I look back at it, I kind of want to redo it, because, as your skills grow, your standards for yourself change.
That's a lot better, had a healthier mentality to think about it. I know a lot of people who are like, I hated what I did, and they just end it there. And I'm like, no, it's because you grew. It's because you learned.
Yes.
You know more. Yeah.
Yeah, and like people like Jessica Nigri and Svetlana from Kamui Cosplay talk all the time about like progress and how much work you have to put in. And Svetlana even did a video showing her, and I quote, shitty cosplays from when she first started. And I think she's been doing it now for like 12 years or something. But you grow so much, and you need to cut yourself a lot of slack. Yeah. So I'm currently working on some really complicated ones by my own standards that I'm really proud of. I'm doing an Avatar: The Last Airbender group cosplay, which is going to be fucking amazing for Anime Central. And I'm going to be Azula, and so I'm doing her like book 3 with the armor.
Yes, that's
very
awesome.
Excited. So excited. She's my favorite, and Avatar is very important to me. It's my favorite animated series of all time, and I've always wanted to do a cosplay from it. I'm doing one from JoJo. It's actually Jotaro, and that one is done. I just need to get a wig. I made I made the hat, and I made the coat myself, and I'm super proud of that, because I suck at sewing so bad, and I made like the entire outfit myself. So that's a big achievement. And then my best friend and I are going as Sailor Neptune and Sailor Uranus from Sailor Moon.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's
gonna be like comfortable cosplay for the weekend.
Yeah. What cons for that coming up in May?
It's Anime Central, ASN.
Oh, okay.
It's Chicago based, I think. It's the biggest anime con in the Midwest, but I'm not 100% sure. I go to a lot of Chicago cons because I'm from the Chicago suburbs, but I live in
Mm.
Texas now. So I do this to myself. I make myself travel like 1,000 miles just to go to a convention when Dallas is right there.
Mm. And RTX is coming up. Yeah, I'd love to go ahead and go there. I'd love to go ahead and go back to Chicago right there. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I should go to RTX. What's wrong with me?
Coming,
Anyway.
it's coming up. It's like I watch a lot of Rooster Teeth. They're coming up in I think it's like the 3rd and the 5th of June. So yeah.
Oh wow,
Uh,
I could go. Yeah, I used to be a huge Rooster Teeth fan.
mm,
And my two of my best friends are really into Ruby.
mm, yeah, a lot of people
And I
get
always
into
wanted to
it.
watch it. I think I watched the first episode and then I got distracted and never picked it back up again.
Tends to happen. I know Ruby was somewhat a little bit hard to go ahead and get into, but yeah, all right. Yeah, I mean like I've seen like some of your cosplays and I enjoy them. I've seen your progress pics on my Twitter feed as well, and I'm always like, oh, that's what she's doing. All right, rad. Because I never get to go. I've wanted to. I've never fully seen like, other than your Twitter and profile banner, I've never seen that you fully in cosplay, and I'm just like I'm just waiting for, like, I can't wait to see the full photos.
I
So I'm
know. I hate it because it takes so long and I don't tend to like get up into a cosplay unless I'm going to a con, and I've never done like a professional photo shoot for cosplays before, so I don't have a lot of me in cosplays, so I feel like I'm kind of just almost like imposter syndrome.
mm, oh,
Where I'm like, I know I'm doing all of this cosplay stuff, but I don't have much to show for it. So
mm,
I think that's another reason why I really wanted to hard commit to finishing these 3, getting them done, so I
mm.
can look at myself and be like, look, you're a real cosplayer. Look at all of these cosplays. Because I
Yeah.
have so many that are like half finished that I either got frustrated with or lost interest in or said, I'm gonna pick it up later.
Mm,
So it's hard that way. And I
mm,
think anybody who is really into cosplay would be able to tell you. But you get stuck on something and you're like, you know what? I would rather just not do this right now. So I'm gonna tell myself I'll do it later. I have
mm.
I started one of Mercy Overwatch like a year ago, and the armor looks great, but I haven't done the rest of it yet.
Mm. I think you make a really good Mercy. I'm
Thank
just like,
you.
yeah. That's the real quick. That's like one of my favorite segue. This just like a quick sidebar. I love how like there's no last name for any of the characters, so they
Yeah.
just call it. My favorite is, my name is Winston Overwatch, and I like peanut butter. It's fucking, oh my god.
For some reason, McCree Overwatch is the one that really gets me.
That's a good one.
Because his last name is McCree. I think that's why it's so funny to me.
His name is Overwatch McCree. That's what it is. Yeah.
Yes, I know.
Hello.
Any
Yes.
character that goes by their last name, their real last name is just the name of the series.
Like Sans Undertale. Anyway,
Sans Undertale, yes.
yeah.
I don't know why I think that meme is so funny of just making every character's last name the name of the media. But I do. But yes, and
It's
I'm
hilarious.
instead of finishing Mercy, I'm working on next a Widowmaker cosplay for BlizzCon because apparently I'm just never gonna finish this cosplay.
I think Mercy is one of the most intricate like designs, because not only do you have the wings, you've got the armor, you've got the staff, like depending on how far you want to go with it. So I think
Yeah.
I think you could definitely do a Widowmaker, and I think Mercy is more of the, like, once you've gained enough experience, you can go ahead and do it and get back to it. But you're never, it's never incomplete. It's always in progress. That's what I like to think.
Yes. And you
Yeah.
know what? And my husband is actually like the best in supporting me in that kind of thing, because he's like, well, it wasn't a waste of time and resources because look at how much you've learned. Look how much practice you got. Like, you did this. And
Mhm.
so it's not worthless just because you don't have like nice photos of it.
Yeah.
And that's something that I really try to keep close to me in everything I do.
I think it's important to recognize that just because, like, the work that you've posted online is not fully seen, especially the finished product. It's not that it's not less than what it's worth. I mean, think about it, we've all done work that never either saw the light of day or whatever, but we've learned a lot from the process, and that's just life, man.
Yeah. And you do still have the experience, and even though you can't list it on your resume or anything, like, it's still there, and you still took something away from it, even if the lesson was, okay, perhaps if the director seems sketchy, I should just not take the job. Because, boy, we've all learned that one.
Yeah, there have been multiple cases of that. And you know what? I'd love to go ahead and I'll go ahead and I think that's be an interesting thing to touch on. I know that in terms of like, so in the show of Commissions Open, we talk about mostly people who do commission-based projects and their horror stories with having to directly work with people, because it is a very like conversation-based, discussing things that you've ever had to deal with. Has there ever been anybody that you've worked with either in like either in accepting commissions for voice acting, or like done things like where you've applied for something and then like the direction just doesn't go the way you initially thought, like anything at all that you feel like this is more of a horror story of like dealing with this sort of thing and dealing with other people? Have you ever experienced that?
Yes. I have two. One is less of a horror story, and it's a more realistic thing that just happens that I don't think people should put up with. And one is kind of just a weird thing. I'm going to start with the weird one because that's fun.
Okay.
So I'm very well known in a very small niche area of the internet because of all the stuff I do for Fallout content.
Yes.
Specifically. And there was a big fan of my machinima who contacted me and said that he was making, he wanted me to work on an audiobook of something that he had written. It was either an audio drama adaptation of a book or it was the audiobook narration. I can't remember now because this was a long time ago, but I was like, okay. It was going to be published episodically, and we had decided on a price per episode. And I said, this is my hourly rate. So if you need me to redo this for some reason, I am going to need you to pay me again because I need to be paid for the work I'm doing. And that ties into the next story as well. And he was like, okay. And when it came time to actually record, I was like, again, I'm going to have to reiterate, if this recording goes over an hour, if this direction goes over an hour, there will be an additional fee. And if you need me to edit, there will be an additional fee. And he was like, well, I have this budget per episode. And I said, well, that's not my problem. I told you before, I'm going to be paid for all the work that I do. And he was like, well, that's not what we agreed on. And I said, it is. It really is. And I'm not going to name a number, but the budget that he had was far lower than I would normally work for. I was being kind because he was a fan of my work and he was obviously very new to directing. But it was like, it got really weird because he got so strange about, and it wasn't likely that it was going to go over the recording time, but the possibility being brought up, he just like altogether quit and like, I think tossed the project. It never got published.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it's not, I said it was a weird story, but it's more sad. I think that's an example of just not realistically understanding how the market works. Yeah. The next one that I was going to talk about is actually a well-known podcast. And the director had a per minute rate, but it was per minute of finished audio, and that's fine with me. But he asked me to edit my own audio. And I was like, okay, well, I am also going to need to be paid for the time I spent editing. And he refused. And he was like, well, all the other actors do it this way. And I was like, well, I don't want to do it that way because I'm going to be paid for my work. I'm not an audio engineer, but I do this all the time. I have a lot of experience. And, if I'm going to spend an hour or 2 hours, because this was, it's one of those things where the finished audio would have been about 20 minutes or more. So you can imagine how long the raw audio was. And that's why it was a problem for me. I was like, this is going to take a long time because I have to listen to this at least twice. And that's going to take me 40 minutes, even if I get it all on the first pass, just to listen to it. And he refused. So we didn't end up working together, of course. But that's something that I see people talking about on like voiceover Twitter a lot, and I'm glad that people talk about it more. And I know Amy Smith, I think it was, published her rate card recently, and I think that's a great thing too.
Yeah.
I don't have a hard rate, so I don't have a rate card. But I think it's something we need to talk about is, do you do the extra labor for free because the market is so saturated with voice actors who are so desperate to get picked?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a big problem.
It is, and I think that mostly comes from, I would even go so far as to say that I'm a little bit a part of the problem. I think mostly because of the work that I do on Fiverr. That being I accept random commissions for a small amount of money, and for like lower quality, for like not so much lower quality but more personal projects, and not so much big ones. I think that first off, I'm going to say right now that like I'm so thankful that you were willing to do this for free, because like this is just, although it is more of a casual, laid back, one-on-one conversation, I would I want to say thank you for going ahead and doing this in that regard. But the difference between getting paid for like you're doing acting and you actually being yourself and talking and like not having to prepare a script and then focus on editing it and all that, that is work that you have put time into, and it is very important for you to go ahead and like be paid for it. And so if you've ever, and I know that you currently are strong with like, you know that your rate and your time is worth it, but I know a lot of people who do not feel the exact same way, mostly because they don't feel like they have enough either experience under their belt, or they don't know if they have the work that they're cut out for, or anything like that. I think that it is very I think it's very it's going back to what you said way before, like imposter syndrome, where they don't feel like, oh, I'm barely a voice actor, or I'm barely a voice actress. Like,
But
I don't
they think I'm not a real voice actor. I just do fan dubs, or I'm not a real voice actor. I just, do comic dubs. I'm not a real voice actor. I just do these fun projects because I like them. And it's true. You do those fun projects because you like them, but you deserve to be paid. And I'm not saying that doing unpaid or low paid work is inherently wrong, because I do unpaid work all the time. And when I've like been working on my passion projects, there were times I couldn't pay actors, and all of the actors were volunteers. I felt okay about that because I wasn't being paid either.
Yeah.
When I was making the machinima, we did have a Patreon page, but all of the money went into an account, and it was used for like doing merch giveaways or buying actors like a pop filter. It was like show funds, and we didn't pocket that. So my problem is when the creator and like one other person are making money, and then they decide they don't want to pay their voice actors properly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the biggest problem for me. But yeah, I work for free all the time.
No, yeah, I think and in terms of like getting like for if you're expecting to make like a media that's like, you're going on YouTube and it's making like barely ad revenue. We know that ad revenue is not at all like, unless you get unless you hit a certain amount and then you get more than like the state amount. Google AdSense is not going to get you enough for you to go ahead and pay for any of the like any of the actors or actresses for that specific medium. It's going to require like marketing yourself in a totally different way of like creating a product or something along those lines, or anything like that. That is the way you would have to go ahead and make money specifically on a project. And that's only because I've been looking at a lot of different marketing stuff, because I'm trying to make this podcast the ground.
And I asked you about this podcast and if it would be monetized for that reason, because honestly, if you qualify for like AdSense ads, good for you. Keep it, because you're going to make like $6 a video, even if they're pretty successful. It's people think that it's like big internet money when you get monetized on YouTube, and it's nothing. But if it's like one of those things where, I'm not going to name any names because I don't want to be shady and start drama, but I can think of at least one specific project that is making like thousands of dollars on Patreon a month and does not pay a lot of the people who are working on the project. And that's just, for me, is gross. Like, why? Don't do that. That's not nice.
It's really not.
But sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent, but looping
Oh,
back around to what I
oh,
was saying.
oh no, that
Uh,
but before you do that, actually, that's what you stated right there is incredibly important to note, and I'm glad you brought it up. But yeah, that's more of I'm glad you brought up like the not being paid sort of thing. So it's
yeah.
important to go and discuss, especially in our small community.
And again, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with being a Fiverr voice actor, because for small things, it's okay. Like, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter. Just what I would say to any voice actor is, before you work on any project, if there's a chance that it will become something that is heavily monetized, if there's any chance, if it's going on YouTube or something, at least have some sort of agreement in place in writing
Mm-hmm.
that, if they get a big sponsor, you're going to be paid for the work that you put in.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with having a contract that has those specifics in it and then doing it up front for less than you normally would.
Yeah,
And if you know it's going to be commercialized, please ask a commercial rate, because
exactly.
otherwise you screw everyone else over. But yes, no. At first, I was doing projects for like $5 or free that were making money, and I have a voice actor that I've known for a couple years who has kind of been my mentor,
Mm-hmm.
and he actually was the connection into how I got my agent. But he was like, you need to start charging more money. Like, you cannot be charging like minimum wage for voiceover work, especially if somebody's going to use it in a commercial project. I was like, I can't. And he was like, no, stop. Like, what's wrong with you? No.
That's a good segue into getting your talent agency, because you haven't done as much voice acting work as you stated, but you're still a part of a talent agency. I'd love to go and hear about like the process of getting one, because I know some people who are relatively small who like are thinking about like, oh, maybe, but they have no clue like what it is to look for and all of that. So go ahead and talk about all of that as much as you can.
I will. And I want to preface it by saying something that I see. I know I saw Melissa Medina on Twitter talking about this the other day, and she's absolutely right. Do not, if you get an agent, expect that to be like your ticket to the top. It's not going to be. I I was saying to Dot Conrad earlier, like, it's nothing. It's nothing compared to how much work you can get for yourself if you just go after it with enough. Is assertion the word I'm looking for? You need
Mm-hmm.
to actively pursue it. Your agent is not going to hand you jobs. The way it works for me, I'm represented by a talent agency in Los Angeles called AB Squared Talent.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, how it works is my agent sorts the roles by gender and then sends them out to everybody in the agency, like every actor that's under her. And then if you want to read for it, you submit. And if you don't, then you don't. And then she gets a certain percentage of what you earn if you book through her. Uh, I cannot tell you how many auditions I've just sent out into the void and never heard about. And people
Mm-hmm.
think that once you have an agent, you've made it. And I think once you have an agent, it makes you look more credible. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's very valuable in that. Also, when you have an agent, if you're talking about a commercial project and you don't know what you should be charging, you don't know about what you should be signing or not signing, sending them over to your agent is something you can do. And for me, like, she earns her keep there, because I
Yeah.
hate having to negotiate rates when it's discussing a lot of money. It terrifies me. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, you can just go talk to Andrea, and
Mm-hmm.
that is, I think, the best part for me. But yeah, I think that's really all I have to say about it, is that if you're seeking an agency, understand that you will still be doing the bulk of finding your work. An agent
Okay.
is more there to protect you and to help you find opportunities, but it doesn't mean that you are going to book more.
Mm-hmm. I think that in terms of like finding an agent, I'd love to go ahead and discuss this a little bit about you, because there are some questions that, like, as someone who doesn't have one, and as you stated a lot there, and I think it's important to go ahead and discuss. You've stated that like it's more of a you submit to see if they want to include you into the list. You you get accepted into the agency, and then they send you like in bulk these lists of like auditions that they receive. But I would love to go ahead and hear about I'm not entirely sure how the process works in terms of like keeping in contact, and two, like I've heard there's been like some debate, at least online, about like the type of agency you should go to specifically for voice acting. And like if like there's even some people who say like should you pay to go ahead and get initially, or do you not, or do you get
No.
like, yeah, there
There's
I've
one answer to that, and it's
yeah,
no.
yeah,
If
I've
an
heard
agent,
people do that.
yeah, if an agent ever asks for money up front, like a buy-in, unless you are paying dues for the union, do not give them money. And of course, the Screen Actors Guild is not your agent, but I'm just saying, if it's union dues, then yes, you pay those to be a part of the union. But no, under no circumstances do you pay your agent unless it is because you got paid for a job. I've never had to pay my agent a fee outside of what she's entitled to of what I make. And I see that question so much. Like, don't ever pay someone to find you jobs. Okay? Don't ever pay anybody up front with the promise of they are going to get you work. It's a scam.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm very passionate about that. Don't do it.
No, that is that's incredibly important to note, because I've heard from multiple people that there are agencies that will do that, and that while they do find you work, like there's plenty of agencies that don't do that, that will get you possibly like similar or even more work at the same price, because they're getting the value from like people actually accepting the people actually being accepted for the role. So
Yeah, and now I'm probably going to have an actor who's represented by one of those angry at me about this and being like, well, you can't say that. You're just biased. You don't know. But in all of my acting experience my whole life, and I grew up with people who had agents for like, on-screen acting and stuff, and they've all said the same thing. Don't ever work with somebody who wants money up front when they don't have a job for you. And that's really it. And to say more about agencies in relation to voice acting, it's know that it will be really, really difficult to find an agent if you don't live in Los Angeles or New York. Like, very, very hard. And I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I live very close to Funimation, actually, and I have been rejected from several DFW agencies. I ended up in with this agency in Los Angeles because the friend who recommended me to my agent is from LA, and understand that if you don't live in LA, it's going to be even harder to find work when you have that agent, because my agent can't send me any auditions that are for work that is only in studio in Los Angeles. So I have to work remotely or with a company that is willing to book in Fort Worth.
yeah.
So just, again, realistic expectations, I think. If you're looking for an agent, just understand that the reality is that they're not going to be what sets you up. You are always what set you up, and that sounds really cliche and cheesy, but it's very true. There's a reason people say it all the time. Like, you are absolutely in control of your career. Takes a lot of luck, but also you have to work.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that, and I'm glad to go ahead and note that like an agency is not the end all be all of like the work of like, oh, I finally landed it, and then nothing. But I appreciate you going ahead and mentioning that to me. I appreciate that you telling that to everybody who is listening. And real quick, before it's been about an hour. We took a little bit of a break because of your PC, but that's fine. The one thing I want to go ahead and ask you about, if you're okay with being more personable, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And you could, if you want, you could tell me like, I'll edit this out because for whatever reason, you are non-binary, and I think that representation is one that is not only needed but welcome in this voice acting community. Do you want to discuss anything about that, or is it just more of a I'm this and that's that?
I can talk a little about it. I don't think it's going to be a very interesting answer.
Hmm.
Non-binary means a lot of things, and I think the reason I don't talk so loudly about it and never really gave it much thought is because there's a lot of gatekeeping and a lot of like hatred for non-binary people in general.
Hmm.
People don't like what they don't understand. I consider myself to be non-binary because I joke that I'm gender indifferent.
Hmm.
I couldn't care less about it. It couldn't have any less to do with me as a person. Um, you know, and of course I am heavily interpreted as a woman and as most people assume a cisgender woman.
Hmm.
And that doesn't really bother me, but I know in my head I'm like, okay, well, whatever, because that's
Yeah.
just not the case. For
Hmm.
other people, it's very important to them and it's intrinsically a part of who they are. I have a friend who is in audio drama and is in voiceover, and I won't mention this person by name because I don't know if they'd be comfortable with that. But,
Hmm.
for them, being non binary and talking about it and being vocal about it is a huge deal. And seeing non binary representation in media is a huge deal. And I think for voice actors especially, it's a hard spot to be in because every casting call you receive is labeled female or male,
Hmm.
or like no specific gender, but it's not because they want a non-binary actor. Usually it's because they don't care if the character is male or female and will decide when they cast.
Hmm.
And even if I'm a non-binary person, if I'm submitting for a role that is labeled male, I know that I am not going to be the person they pick for that role.
Hmm.
Because you hear me and you hear a woman's voice. Or, if you're feeling scrappy, a little boy's voice.
Yeah.
So, and I'm kind of glad you asked me about this because I am a huge advocate of like trans slash non-binary roles being created,
Yes.
especially in audio dramas. And the audio drama I'm working on, the main character is a transgender man, and also one of the other main characters is non-binary.
Hmm.
And it's something that's very close to me, and it's something I'm seeing more often. And I think it's great. And I think if nothing else, it leads to creative writing. Because if you don't give a shit about the gender of your character, then you write whatever you want. But, I don't speak for everybody, and everybody's experience is different. So I hope that the takeaway from this is not that this is what being non-binary means,
Oh.
and non-binary is an umbrella term, and there are people who
Hmm.
are agender or gender fluid or gender nonconforming and gender queer, and they all mean different things.
Yeah.
So, it's for everybody listening. This is me, and it's very different from person to person.
Yeah, and I think the biggest highlight from this is that no matter what the case is, like, it's important to be represented in any sort of manner. So I appreciate you going ahead and mentioning that. And even if there isn't too many people who specifically follow that sort of like even if the amount of people who listen to this who are also the same sort of non-binary as you is like one, that's still very important for them to at least hear. And it's important for everybody to go and hear about and realize that their representation is always important in this sort of media. And I appreciate you going ahead and being comfortable with telling me about that and discussing that with me. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you for asking me to talk about it. It's always great to be asked, and the last two times that I appeared on a podcast or on somebody's stream, they asked everybody's pronouns and were very kind about it. So that's great, and it means so much. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. It's always important to make sure not only the guest is comfortable, but everybody else is like comfortable with how they want to go ahead and be referred to. And you are, and while you say that, yes, it is like in the voice acting world is very much like very gender binary in
Mm-hmm.
terms of the voice roles and the roles that we choose, and people like assume from the tone of the voice that we hear, like that's literally like a part of our jobs is to like convey those feelings in that sort of spectrum of like when you hear my voice, you do not assume like, oh yeah, female, like that's just and
Right.
that only really comes from like that's how acting has sort of been and how we have sort of become in tune with it. And as voice acting, all of it is about like trying to sound like how other people. It's voice acting is the weirdest thing. It's like it is assuming the idea in your head of what this thing sounds like. And so it's always like it's not only going to be like sometimes different for other people, sometimes like a lot of people have similar things in common, but it's incredibly important to be for having all these sort of things, transgender and non-binaries, non-binary representation to be in this sort of media, because sometimes barriers need to be broken from how we think about the rigidity of how everything is being like in terms of like acting and voice acting. So
Yeah,
yeah,
they do. And I have one. I know we're getting close to time, but I have one more thing to say about that.
no, you're fine. Go over. I don't mind.
I just, and again, I'm so thankful that we're talking about this, because even for binary trans people, um, when you're a voice actor, what does that entail for you? Like, I know, again, not going to name any names because I don't know if they would be comfortable with that, if he would be comfortable with that, but I do know a very, very talented trans man voice actor who has a very high voice.
Mm-hmm.
And he hasn't been able to start to transition yet for whatever reason. So he has to voice a lot of girls and women. And I can't even, because gender, it means something completely different to me. I can't even imagine how awful that must be when you feel so invalidated by the work that you love. It's awful. And you know that when somebody posts a casting call saying, we need a man, your voice isn't what they're asking for. And we need to adjust our expectations for what men and women look like, and then look at people and discuss, who are people and what do we want them to sound like and what do we want to depict them as? Because when you create things, it can be whatever you decide. And I think we just need to remember that our own personal experiences matter and that they add to it, Yeah. I'm kind of rambling at this point, but my big takeaway there is we have so much value and we have so much to give. Like this actor that I'm talking about, he's just incredible. And he deserves to be able to play roles that he relates to. We all do. We all deserve to be passionate about our work because we love voice acting.
I 100% agree, and I think as more creators come into the space of like whether it be more voice actors or actresses or more people who are in the creative field that want to hire us, that want to create characters that fall into those categories of like transgender or non-binary. I think I'm hopeful that it is eventually going to that need is going to be filled by people who are seeking those sort of like characters, and I definitely think that there's definitely a role for those people, and they are always welcome in this community, no matter, even if you feel like the work that you've put in is the opposite of how you feel. Just know that you are incredibly valid. You are incredibly valid for how you are and how you feel, and who you are. It's incredibly important to keep that in mind.
Yes, and also if you love mythology and you want to see queer people represented in really interesting work, check out Fireside Folktales. My friend Dallas makes podcasts that Dallas is a non-binary director and actor, and the work that Dallas does focuses on like trans people and people of color and people in the queer community. So check them out if that's the content you're looking for. Sorry, I had to do a little plug.
Oh, please. And in fact, like, since we're about to wrap up, I'd love to go ahead and plug all of your things. Because anything that you want to go ahead and have, like, if you have any more like that, you can follow Mya on Twitter at Mya Schuwerk, MyASchuwerk for the audio listeners on Twitter. And if you want to go ahead and that's for all the audio listeners, and for all the video listeners, links in the description as always, with everything they do. And you've just been a wonderful guest, and I'm hoping that we can become I'd love to go and have you on someday in the future when everything gets moving.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Commissions Open. If you would, please follow this podcast on whatever app you use. I would most definitely appreciate it. If you're just listening, that's perfectly fine. However, if you'd like, you can also watch this podcast on YouTube to see a custom commission every episode for each guest I have on, as well as to see the wonderful podcast set. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at ComsOpenPodcast. That's COMS Open Podcast on Twitter. Finally, you can follow today's guest Mya on Twitter at Mya Schuwerk and on Instagram at Mya Schuwerk Cosplay. That's MYASCHUWERK and on Instagram at MYASCHUWERK Cosplay. Thank you and have a wonderful day.